Hi. All right. I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Jeannie. I have a master's in instructional design. I spent the last decade as an instructional designer, and now I am a solution architect for SweetRush. But having spent several years designing learning for large and complex organizations, I know how often training requests come to us with the decisions already made, right? We need a course, we need a refresher, we need people to understand X. And I know how easy it is to look at those requests at face value and to just want to be helpful and to say yes. So I'm really pleased to talk about this topic today and to hopefully encourage healthier partnerships with stakeholders.
All right. Thanks, Jeannie. Hi, everyone. I'm Therese Longo. I'm also a solution architect at SweetRush, and I've spent, over 20 years helping organizations solve performance challenges by looking beyond training, and focusing on the work that people do every day. I love helping teams uncover the real causes of performance gaps and designing solutions that make a measurable difference. I'm really excited to be here today and share some of the practical tools that Jeannie and I have that you can apply right away with your stakeholders. So we've already introduced the course a little bit, but I do want to say, that we're going to be talking about designing beyond training. And not because training isn't important, it really is, but because training is only one way to improve performance. Instructional designers often get requests, like Jeannie mentioned earlier, we need a course or we need a refresher. And sometimes that is the exact right solution, but sometimes the real issue is something else. It might be unclear expectations, a broken process, competing priorities, or missing tools, or simply a lack of practice. So today we'll explore how to move from taking training requests at face value to uncovering what is really driving the performance gap. My hope is that you'll leave with a practical approach for asking better questions, diagnosing the real problem, and recommending solutions that really help people perform, not just complete a training experience. So before we dive in, just a little bit about SweetRush. For those of you who are new to our organization, we launched in 2001 and have been fully remote since 2009. We've been a strong player in the L&D industry for the past 25 years. And just this January, we joined the NIIT family of world-class learning services. At SweetRush, we help organizations improve performance through custom learning solutions, emerging technologies, staff augmentation, talent placement, and strategic consulting. We partner with our clients to solve complex business challenges and build learning strategies that really drive measurable results. We also are honored to have received numerous industry awards for the solutions that we develop with our amazing client partners. So to kick things off, love to get a quick pulse of the group. Um, One, you could also, when you're answering this, maybe also put your role, who you are, and also answer this question. How effectively are you helping stakeholders identify performance gaps during intake? So in the chat, please respond with one, it feels harder than it should be. Two, depends on the stakeholder. And three, crushing it.
A lot of twos so far.
Yeah.
Creative director.
And Jennifer, yeah, thanks for including your role.
Hmm.
A lot of twos.
Hmm.
A lot of twos.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of twos.
Alexi. Hey, Jillian.
All right.
Yes, depends on if they respect our knowledge and experience.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Great. Yeah, so there's no, right or wrong answer here, but many instructional designers are incredibly skilled at designing learning, but often sometimes harder to guide that stakeholder through that diagnosing conversation. Again, I agree. If they do not respect our expertise, that makes it even more challenging. But hopefully today we'll provide some strategies for asking questions that maybe can get to the root of the problem.
Right.
So by the end of today's session, our goal is that you feel more confident leading stakeholder conversations that get to the real performance problem and hopefully move beyond that training request. You'll have a you'll have a practical approach that we're going to share for asking better questions, uncovering what's really driving the issue, and recommending solutions that help people perform, not just learn. Over to you.
All right. So we have Nayab. She's an LXD, learning experience designer. And here we have Jeremy, the stakeholder. In this case, he's a director of a clinic operations at a doctor's office. So let's just say like a general practitioner, a family medicine office. So I know a lot of you may be coming from larger organizations, probably a lot of virtual. I saw um, more of a faculty and director of academic, it's that type of setting. But sometimes it's easier to simplify this concept down to something super straightforward, like a doctor's office. So as we go through this, just try to imagine having this same conversation with the stakeholder of yours. All right, so in our scenario, Jeremy comes to NAAB with a very clear request. He wants three e-learning courses, one on communication, one on escalation handling, and one on decision making. And this is where the order taker trap really shows up. An order taker does exactly what was asked. They write it down like a server taking an order and say, all right, I got it. Let me take this back to the kitchen. I'm going to cook this back up for you. And really, that instinct makes sense, right? We want to be helpful. We want to be responsive. And when we're working with senior stakeholders, it can feel intimidating to slow the conversation down and ask more questions. And so we have to think about our role as an instructional designer, as an LXD or a solution architect. Our role is not just to produce the requested asset. We're designers. Our role is to understand the performance need behind the request instead of being an order taker. So instead of jumping straight into the timelines, content, seat time, deliverables, all of those things, a performance partner starts with a little bit of a better question. What happens now, or what is happening now that needs to change? And that one question shifts the conversation from what do you want us to build to what problem are we trying to solve? So here's what Nan can do. She can pull up her discovery guide and she starts by capturing the request exactly as it came in, whether it was an email, an RFP, or right there in the conversation. And we're going to share this guide here in the chat when we're done so you can use it in your own intake meetings. But this guide really will help slow the conversation down in a practical way. A huge analysis process isn't always practical. Time is always against us, but you can do something. And this guide just offers a simple structure for moving from what are we being asked to build to what problem are we trying to solve, what needs to change, and most importantly, to drive the design for your solution, what support will actually help. So as we go through Nave and Jeremy's conversation, you'll see we'll fill part of this in, and you'll see the full length of the form has more fields in there, but we'll get to the root of starting with this request and then working toward the real performance gap underneath it. All right, so she has a request from Jeremy. Now, this is the first moment where Nayab shifts from simply receiving the request to shaping the conversation. She doesn't push back or make the stakeholder feel wrong for asking for training, right? She treats the request as useful information as a starting point, and then it's about gently redirecting toward the business issue underneath it. So that's the power of this warm yes you see in that indicator at the top there. It helps stakeholders feel heard and reassured. Something like, absolutely, I can definitely help with that, right? Then comes in the expert boundary. Before we jump into building, let's make sure we understand what needs to change. That line has to be delivered with confidence because this is where you step into the role you were hired to play. You're not blocking the request, you're helping make sure the solution is worth everyone's time and really their investment in you. And here's the nuance. If we ask the follow-up question of what's your operational goal right away, It can be a little bit of a gamble. So some stakeholders will know exactly how to answer, right? But what we've all learned, a lot of them won't. And not because it's a difficult question or the goal is difficult, but because training requests usually just come through a chain of urgency. Someone noticed a problem, the leader asks for their support, and by the time it reaches you, the request has already sounded like it's a done deal, it's a solution, and this is what we needed to have done. But the analysis really never was completed, right? So instead of starting with a big abstract goal question, start closer to what they can see. What are you noticing, Jeremy, operationally that prompted this request? What are you noticing? That gives the stakeholder just a little bit easier of an entry point. They don't have to have the perfect goal language yet. They just need to describe what's happening. And from there, you can help them work toward the goal and the signal and the performance gap. All right, so Jeremy says they're seeing too many appointments where patients are showing up and something isn't ready, like the new patient form, maybe some labs or an x-rays. So perfect. She's got this challenge the office is facing, and Nab can go ahead and add that right into the form. And now we ask, how are you measuring that right now? What we're really asking is, how do you know if this is happening? This is just an escalation, whether it be a large organization or the small office or wherever it may be. How do you know what's happening? Are these just complaints? Are these just kind of hearsays? Are these just kind of things that they're drumming up like, oh, it's probably, I think we just need a training on this. This feels right, right? How do you know appointments are being delayed or disrupted because of the missing prep? And this is where the conversation gets super interesting because we're looking for any existing signals, data, standards, expectations, patterns, even even the informal feedback, right, of from the clinic office. All of that adds up that will help us understand the problem more clearly. And sometimes you get some clean, beautiful data like, oh, yeah, I've got this dashboard here of all these metrics and KPIs, and here's exactly the problem. Perfect. Chef's kiss. Done. Like now I can move on into the next part. But more often than not, especially in the first intake conversation, the answer's a little bit messy, and the stakeholder may have a hunch and a few examples or feedback, but not the perfect KPI. Like this. He says, we're mostly hearing it from providers and front desk leads. So Jeremy doesn't have any clean data, right? He doesn't have a signal. But he does have a signal. Providers and desk leads are noticing a pattern, and the feedback has made its way to a training request. And that's normal. A lot of discovery questions start here with frustration, repeated comments. It's just kind of buzzing around like, oh man, we just keep getting these patients keep showing up and they're not prepared. What's going on? So they assume it's got to be either the patient or the front desk or the clinic staff, but they know there's a problem, and so it runs up the chain. They say, "Hey, we need a training on this. People are not doing this correctly, right?" It's a problem people can feel before they can fully measure it. So we don't need to stop the conversation just because the data isn't perfect. This is the part where, as designers, we just get a little bit more curious. Because messy data doesn't mean there's no measurable goal. It just means that we may need to help the stakeholder create a practical signal first. So instead of asking, well, we don't, or saying we don't have data, so we can't measure this. She can ask, what's the lightest way that we can get a baseline? And this is where we have to be realistic. In a perfect world, we would love a dashboard and clean reporting and a full breakdown of every appointment disruption. And sometimes it's absolutely worth advocating for better measurement. And maybe it's advocating for it after this is all done, right? Maybe there's some urgency to this and they want this done in a couple of weeks, and we can advocate for that afterward and follow up. But we have to read the room. Jeremy has other priorities. His clinic team is busy. If NAB comes in and asking for this huge new tracking process, he may start to feel like the analysis is creating more work than the training request itself, right? So the balance is don't give up on measurement, just make that first step really manageable. In this case, NAB doesn't need Jeremy to launch a big KPI dashboard. She just needs just enough to answer one practical question, which is when appointments aren't visit ready, what's usually missing, right? And that's the baseline. And once they have that, they can start to turn a messy problem into a measurable goal. So this becomes the next move here. So you find the signal and then you confirm the pattern. A signal is just a practical clue. So it could be a tally, a checklist, a quick sample, or some observation notes, something lightweight that tells us what's currently happening. If you can notice some sort of theme here, we're being realistic, right? We know that we may, if you were in some sort of certification or instructional design program, you've heard this elaborate analysis process, which is very valuable in a lot of settings, right? There is a lot to that, but sometimes it needs to be super lightweight and simple so we can get somewhere, right? We're earning that trust with our stakeholders to advocate for bigger analysis processes in the future, right? So what if NAAB asked Jeremy to have the front desk just take a tally on a simple sheet of paper every time a patient shows up unprepared? Super easy, right? One signal by itself can be too noisy, right? We can't just go on that alone. There's way too many variables. If we just want the tally, how many of those were the patient's fault and how many of those were the clinic's fault? So we want to compare it with other clues to see if there's some sort of pattern. So we could compare that with delayed appointment reasons, prep checklist completions, like when the reception desk sends out communication to the patient, are they checking it off a list? Provider feedback, patient message logs, same day reschedules. So if all those signals are pointing to the same issue, for example, missing prep instructions or incomplete referrals, then Nab and Jeremy can feel confident that they're solving the right problem. The point is, we don't need to create a big measurement system every time. It's just to find enough evidence to move from we think this is happening to we can see the pattern. All right, so now we have a signal. It's not perfect data, but it's enough to stop guessing. And from there, NAB can help Jeremy turn that signal into a measurable goal. Instead of saying, we want fewer appointment delays, they can say something more concrete. Reduce preventable appointment delays related to missing pre-visit prep by 20% within 60 days. And this is an important moment in the conversation because Jeremy is starting to see NAB differently. Think about what this can do for you in your career as you step forward and make these types of requests and navigate these conversations in this way. She's not just taking the request and running with it, she's helping clarify a real problem. She's defining what success could look like and making the solution more likely to actually improve performance. And that builds trust. And the more NAB helps Jeremy make sense of this problem, the more confidence he has that the final solution will be worth the investment. All right, so now we have a goal. So the next step is to define what people actually need to do to reach that goal. And most importantly, why aren't they doing it now? And this can be a surprisingly tricky question. Even when you ask AI, it's very easy to get responses like, they need to understand the importance of the pre-visit checklist, right? Great. But is Mia's job to stand up and give a speech about why the checklist matters? No, that's not the performance we're trying to change. A better way to think about it is the domino effect. In my head, I always, whenever I get asked this question, and a stakeholder tells me something like they need to understand or they need to be aware of or they need to know the value of what happens? What's the domino effect of when they know the value of something, of when they understand something? That's a if Mia understands why the pre-visit checklist matters, what does that lead her to do? If she completes it consistently, she marks what's ready, she flags what's missing, she routes blockers before the appointments. Those are the actions. So when you hear phrases like understand, know, be aware of, appreciate the importance of, just don't stop there. Picture the dominoes in your head and help your stakeholders picture the dominoes too, right? Ask, what would that understanding actually cause someone to do on the job? And that's where the real performance actually lives.
All right. So now that we've defined the goal, the next step is identifying the behaviors that make that goal possible. So in this example, there are several actions the clinic coordinator could take to help ensure patients arrive ready for care. But rather than trying to improve everything, we want to focus on the behaviors that have the greatest impact on that outcome. So take a look at the list on the screen and think about which one or two behaviors do you think have the biggest influence on reducing appointment delays and reschedules. So go ahead and put your answer in the chat. Give you a minute to read all that and make a decision.
I see Mahogany works in a virtual healthcare org. It's a perfect scenario. I'm
Right?
glad.
Okay. All
That's
right.
great.
So B, we have a B, B, E, D. Yeah, a lot of variety in the answers. I like that.
Mhm.
We'll wait a little bit longer, see if anyone else wants to comment. All are applicable. B and
Mhm.
C, E and F, right. So looking, at this list, you could make a strong case for several of them. In this scenario, I would probably focus on behaviors like confirming required forms are complete, maybe checking that referral information is available, and flagging missing information before the day of the appointment. These actions have a direct impact on whether a patient arrives ready for care and whether the appointment can really proceed as planned. The important thing isn't choosing the perfect behavior, it's identifying the behaviors that have the greatest influence on the outcome you're trying to achieve. So once we've identified those critical behaviors, we can stop guessing about solutions and start asking a better question. What's preventing people from doing these things well or consistently? So to answer that, we'll look in two places, the person performing the behavior and the environment around them. That's where the real diagnosis begins. So Jeremy came to NAB asking for 3 e-learning courses. And at this point, she knows the challenge they're trying to solve and the behaviors that will make the biggest difference. But she's not ready yet to recommend a solution. So before she can tell Jeremy what he really needs, she has to understand the why those behaviors aren't happening consistently or to standard. So if we're looking at the person, we want to ask, do they know what to do? Can they do it consistently? And is it a priority? And if we're looking at the environment, we want to ask, do they have the right tools? Do they have the right processes? Are they getting timely feedback? And are the right incentives in place? So let's start by looking at the person. So meet Mia. She's a clinic coordinator. She's the person most responsible for preparing patients for care. And remember, our goal is to reduce appointment disruptions caused by missing pre-visit preparation. And to do that, we need to understand what successful performance actually looks like in Mia's role. So if we want to achieve the goal, what will Mia be doing differently? Here are some of those things. She'll be reviewing appointment requirements earlier. She'll be verifying forms and referrals before the appointment date. She'll be sending prep instructions consistently. She'll be identifying missing information before it becomes a problem and escalating issues before they create delays. And notice what we've done here. We've translated a business goal into observable behaviors. And this is really a critical step for us as instructional designers because we can't design for better communication or improved performance. Those ideas are too vague, just like what Jeannie was saying earlier, about objectives that are understand or be aware of. We really need to get specific about what these things look like before we can make a bigger change. So we need to identify the specific actions that people need to take in order to really produce the desired results. And once we've identified those, then we can start investigating why they're not happening consistently or to the standards, that we've defined. So before recommending a solution, NAB needs to understand what's preventing those behaviors from happening. Now that NAEB has identified those critical behaviors, we need to talk about how well something is done. A lot of times we talk about the behaviors and we know what people need to do, but what is that result and what does that look like? Because people can do things all day long, but if it doesn't produce a result that is meaningful, then we're just wasting our time. So instead of jumping straight to a learning solution, she starts asking more questions. Does Mia know what to do? Can she do it well and consistently in the real work environment? And does she see it as a priority when competing demands show up? The first possibility is a clarity gap. Sometimes people aren't performing because the expectations aren't clearly defined. Different coordinates may have different interpretations of what good likes, especially, how commonly different people might get trained by someone differently. And if you're only going to learn from that person what they think is right. So again, clearly defining standards is critical. These standards should be aligned with business goals so that what the behavior produces has real impact. And when that happens, training may not even be the right solution. We may be able to nip it in the bud right there, just that there's a misunderstanding or misalignment with what the expectations. So sometimes clear expectations, examples, checklists, or job aids can easily solve this problem. Next, we want to know, knowing and doing, we want to remember that knowing and doing are not the same thing. Someone can explain the process perfectly and still struggle to perform it well in the real world. Scenarios, in this case, scenarios, simulations, realistic practice, and coaching can help build performance, not just knowledge. And third, sometimes people know exactly what to do and have the ability to do it. But the issue is the behavior isn't being reinforced, or people, naturally focus on what gets measured, discussed, and rewarded. So are we aligning what incentivizes someone with, the incentive? If I'd rather have time off versus having, a higher paycheck, then that's what's going to motivate me in terms of incentives. Also, sometimes people don't have the capacity, right? They don't know how to prioritize what needs to be happening. And so they may just push it to the side because they don't think it's as important. So if appointment readiness isn't visible or discussed, it can easily fall behind other priorities. So let's go back to Jeremy for a minute. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting with him. You've already clarified the challenge, identified the critical behaviors, and asked questions to understand what's getting in the way. Now Jeremy turns to you and says, okay, so what should we do about it? That's the moment where your recommendation matters. So I'm going to reveal one issue at a time, and I want you to put in the chat what you would recommend. Think beyond training and recommend the intervention that best addresses the root cause. So doesn't know what to do. We'll wait for some answers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't have a knowledge. How do you solve knowledge gaps? Hmm.
Explain the expectations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Yep. So I'm seeing things like job age, checklists, examples,
Mhm.
accountability. Exactly. So if people don't know what's expected, jumping straight to practice or coaching isn't the best first step, right? They need clarity. And once expectations are clear, then we can decide whether additional learning is needed. Great. So second, what if they can't do it consistently? And I'd probably even add to this or well. right, to the standards. Because
Hmm.
they may do it consistently but poorly. So we do want to make sure that they're doing it to the standards. What do you think here? Hmm. Consider the blocker. Yeah. Review
This is more of a
prioritization.
skill gap, right? So how if you were designing something for a skill gap?
Coaching. Mhm. Yeah, and I agree. There might be other questions that we need to ask.
Hmm.
You know, are they even aware of the inconsistency? Um,
And think about just right, like even just having this up on the screen, job aids, right? That's a really easy one that a requester might have for you. We need a job aid on this. Sure, thanks. Let me go back to the kitchen and make it, right? And then, but that's only solving if they don't know what to do. If they don't know, if they can't do it consistently, is that job aid now, did we waste everyone's time, right? Creating the job aid and the investment in you as a designer and your time
right.
without asking these questions?
Practice. And that's what I was just about to say. A
Yes.
lot of times, we do trainings and people never get to practice what
Yeah.
they're actually going to do on the job. And so, I love and measuring their competence. Exactly, Darren. So, I mean, I think, um, giving them the opportunity to practice in realistic scenarios as much as possible. And, with innovations in technology nowadays with AI, we can do a lot more to really simulate what that practice might be in the real world. And I'm really excited about that intervention.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, um, this is about knowing. It's not about knowing, it's about doing. Do they understand the process? But do they need opportunities to build fluency and confidence so that they can perform consistently in the real work environment? Yeah. Explain, demonstrate, observe, feedback. Excellent. And then third, um, what's the best intervention here? They don't prioritize it. And this might have a little bit to do with not understanding priorities or incentives, and even maybe motivation.
Yeah. I was gonna say motivation, time. Like, yeah, I know what to do, and I could do it consistently if I wanted to, but it's just not a priority to me. I got all these other things going on in this office. I've got all these other things I need to do, and sending out those patient reminders just is not on top priority.
Yeah,
Right. So someone asked for a job aid, you made the job aid, but they already know how to do it. They just don't want, they don't have the priority. How do we solve for that?
right. All right. Um, all right. So great answers, everybody.
Yep. Hmm.
So notice how different your recommendations were depending on the issue. If NAAB
We need a new
had
employee.
accepted, what's that?
But do we need a
We
new
need a new
employee these
employee,
days?
right?
Yeah, right. Get him out of here.
Absolutely.
Just
I love that.
kidding.
I mean, that's another thing, and we could touch on that a little bit when we look at the environment, or even when we're talking about the person. Is it the right person in the right seat? I always love that phrase.
Mhm.
A lot of times it's not, and doesn't matter how much training, how much you create the right performance system, they're just not going to do well because it's not a good fit. So, thanks for bringing that up. And think about it. If NAAB had accepted Jeremy's original request for 3 e-learning courses, some of these things could have been missed. And also some of these things might be less expensive than creating
Mhm.
3 e-learning courses, and maybe solve the problem better. So this is again where we can really demonstrate our value. We don't just build learning, we help the stakeholders like Jeremy solve the problem.
That's right.
Yeah. So at this point, many of us may be ready to start designing, but NAAB isn't finished diagnosing the problem. She asks one final question, Even if coordinators know what to do, can do it well, and want to do it, is the environment supporting good performance? Sometimes the fastest way to improve performance isn't another training course, it's removing the barriers that prevent people from applying what they already know how to do.
Hmm.
And so, we might look at these. Um,
He said, "Here's the meat.
I know,
That's,
right? I love
that's
it.
the meat."
Because again, you know, training could have the best intention, but if everything else in the environment is working against us, they're not going to improve their performance. I mean, we could think about that in our own jobs. If I'm trying to develop a training and I don't have the right tools, um, you know, what's going to happen, right? So does the coordinator have the systems, the information, the resources they need? They may have tools, but maybe those tools are too slow or they're outdated or they're cumbersome. So really um, looking at that, more closely can identify other problems that aren't going to be solved by training, even though sometimes everyone wants to be and just keep throwing training at it. So second, let's look at the process. Is the workflow helping people succeed or creating unnecessary friction? And we know in many organizations, processes aren't documented. They change daily. They're outdated. And so it has a huge impact on how people do their work. Third is feedback. How do the coordinators know whether they're doing a good job? Are they receiving feedback quickly, in the moment when they really need it? Or is it 3 weeks later when they don't even remember what they did wrong or, can't really connect, correct it in the moment? And then finally, incentives. What behaviors are being recognized, rewarded, or reinforced? What if you're a great worker? And so, because you're a great worker, they keep giving you more work or side projects. And then now you're at capacity and you're not really able to do your job as well as you could have in the past. So, notice that NAB isn't making assumptions or trying to solve the problem yet. She's simply asking curious questions to understand the environment surrounding the behavior. So she might ask Jeremy, walk me through what happens when the patient isn't ready for care. We don't want to be accusatory because really these are the areas where the manager makes the biggest difference. They're really responsible for creating that support system and that environment so people can do their best work. So, what if she asked, if Mia does everything right, what makes it easy or difficult for her to be successful? So just, getting Jeremy to think differently about not just the person doing the performance, but what supports it. And I really just love that shift. Those kinds of questions help Jeremy think beyond training and uncover barriers that might never have surfaced if the conversation stayed focused on just building a course. So what let's put ourselves in Nab's shoes for a moment. We've had the conversation with Jeremy, we've clarified the challenge, blah, blah, blah. So now we're going to look at these 4 findings and put the letter in the chat that you think sounds least like a training problem. So go ahead, take a few seconds and let me know what you think. Mhm. Some great comments in here. Yeah, love this. So we've got C. C is a staffing issue. Anything else? All right, B and C. So for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. Again, all of these things, um, are going to contribute to the environment and not necessarily a training need. Again, sometimes it's a blended solution. So let's go ahead and move on. Now that NAB has a clearer picture of what's happening, she's in a much stronger position to make the recommendations. And let's notice what she didn't, notice that she didn't start with a solution. She started by understanding the challenge, identifying the behaviors that matter, and investigating what might be preventing those behaviors from happening. So she's uncovered these challenges, and here are some of the potential solutions that she could recommend. We've got late patient information, automated reminders, not ready, no readiness visibility, could be readiness dashboard or alerts. And again, we aren't necessarily going to be creating these solutions, but we are going to making the recommendation and then maybe pulling together the right people to make them. Under staffing, yep, someone had said C was not staffing properly. And then the final, limited feedback. So, and this may then lead to additional training that we need. We might need to train managers on coaching or other things. So, yeah, sometimes the best solution isn't learning. So the next time someone asks for training, I hope this is the process that you come back to. Resist the urge to immediately discuss content, seat time, or delivery methods. Instead, clarify the challenge, identify the behaviors that drive success, examine the environment around the work, then recommend the solution or combination of solutions that is most likely to improve performance. And that's how we become strategic partners rather than order takers.
All right, one more question. How will this impact your learning solutions? What do you think? Answer in the chat. What do you think about some of the things we shared today, and what's the long-term impact on some of these types of questions that you can ask in your intake meetings? Lead to better conversations. Yep, more collaboration. Yep, a lot of stuff.
Right. A lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, standing your ground.
I love that.
I know it can be so intimidating. I know exactly how that feels, right? And they're like, I need you to do this. And to be able to have that confidence to step back and say, like, actually, I have a few more questions first. Like, I'm the professional here, I'm the designer, and I'm going to help solve a problem. And it can be tricky to navigate.
Exactly. One trick that I always used when I was first doing this was, having some research behind me. People seem to, if you if you know some of the research behind some of these strategies, and how it might really impact the business and talk their language a little bit more,
Mhm.
those are things that I think can also really help that we didn't
Yeah.
touch on specifically today.
Yeah, if you geek out about design methodology and learning theory and all that stuff, let that come through. If you listen to these webinars and you read the articles and all the books, all those things, talk about that stuff. I think it's important to educate about learning theory and design theory, so they can really understand where you're coming from, and also they see you as this valuable partner in this, which is
Right.
really important. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and
Well,
if we get to the root problem, then we're able to see better results. And then again, that just boosts our credibility.
yeah, exactly. So yep, exactly. The future of instructional design isn't just creating more content. It's becoming that performance partner. Understand the challenge, investigate the cause, design for impact. Take pride in your work. Have fun with this role as a designer and as a solutionist. You get to be a detective here. Think about how this can help you grow in your career and how others will see you, how your stakeholders will see you, how what meetings you're now showing up to because they want you part of the conversation earlier on in the process, and maybe before it trickles down to you, like, let's pull Mahogany in here because I really liked how she approached that last thing, and let's see what she has to say before we even request a training, right? So I hope this gave you a little bit of energy boost, some confidence, and some concrete steps to help follow or to follow to help really solve some problems. And I'm gonna add the PDF here. It should be editable. So thanks, Jennifer. Um, when you open up that PDF, it should be editable. You can take that with you and walk through it with your stakeholder. Share your screen so they can see the notes you're taking, see your process, and introduce it too first. It's nice to say, like, I'm going to do something using this discovery guide. I'm going to walk you through these questions before I get started and help them involve them in the process. And having that on your screen share is really cool too. So yeah. Um, and you can skip to the next one. Yep, of course.
So Darren, I think it's going to be
Oh,
attached to the recording too.
oh, cool.
Um, yeah, he's not able to get it that way, so maybe you can get it directly from
We
the
will
recording email.
find it away.
If
Yeah.
not, you have our if not, you have our information here. Feel free to reach out to one of us and we'll be happy to send it to you.
Yeah, we can send it right in your email and just upload it as a PDF. That's great too. So of course, we'd love to stay connected, answer any questions, help your organization with this process. You can scan our QR codes, get some info. Let's open up to questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead and pop them
Definitely
in
connect
the
with us
chat.
on LinkedIn. We want to
Yeah.
stay.
Uh-huh. We like making friends. Any thoughts,
Any questions? Yeah.
questions?
Mel, were there any
We
questions in the
answered everything.
Q&A?
Yep.
I didn't see any questions coming in, and
Okay.
I never take that as a bad thing. That means I always
Mm.
take that as you covered what they needed today.
Yeah.
Ooh, there's a good question. I'm an ID, but I've only been doing development work. How do I change that? Hmm.
Meaning not involved in the instructional design, like in the actual analysis process. Like they're just coming straight to you and passing over. I feel like I've been in that position too. And you just have to better lack of better words, weasel your way into those conversations. Just start with curiosity and say, "Hey, I know I've been handed this project. Is there in the next one that comes up, can I just listen in and be a part of the intake? I'm really curious how that goes." And then once you're in there, like, I've got a question, guys, and just start, asking some questions and start putting yourself in that position. And I've found that to work really well, especially early on in my career. I've always been that way. I've been the one to kind of weasel my way into things, and it's just it helps you show up a little bit more. And yeah, I think it works. What would you do, Therese?
I would also maybe add to that. You could also, do your own self-analysis of the courses that you're developing and come up with maybe recommendations on, by asking those questions on like how you might do it differently or better or pushing toward how is it getting the results that we're looking for. And a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Oh, and I saw one up at the top about what a solution architect is. So yeah, we as requests come into us, we architect the solution. My friends ask, what's a solution architect? We come up with a solution and help define the scope of the project, and then we ultimately pass it off to designers and developers to take it from there.
What sources for reading would you recommend? So I
Ooh,
have my favorites, Map It. Would
yes,
be probably, if
action
you haven't
mapping.
read Map It, that would be, and it's a little bit expensive, but definitely worth it. And the reason I say that is it gives you a methodology, but what walks you through um, all the steps. It's not just about theory, and then you have to figure out how to apply it. And then Julie Dirksen books, I really like her books.
I
The
got
two,
one here. Designed for how people learn.
those are really good. I mean, if you really
Kathy
want to get
Moore.
theoretical, you could go the Ruth Clark path, but I think there's a lot of books now that really make it a little bit more palatable than some of the real academic books. So, but those would be the
Yeah.
three that I would start with. Hmm.
Yep. Map It's great. Kathy Moore, the link I added there, that's her book. So she has a blog that has some great information too. And
Yeah.
then my favorite is Design for How People Learn by Julie Dirksen, which I
Oh,
heard
the other two I really like are the let's see, it's called
big link there, sorry.
Talking, what is it? Telling ain't training and performance. What's the other one? Oh. by the same guy. I know. Um, I have all these books here. So Telling Ain't Training is another really good one. And Harold Stolovich wrote another book about performance. Training Ain't Performance. And that really, it's a really interactive book that gets to some of these concepts in a really applicable way. So those
Hmm.
are, yeah. It is a
Yeah.
classic. I know it's going way back, but it's good and it's the message is good.
And it's good to refresh. That's why I keep it in my drawer here, especially in my Design for How People Learn, because it's really there's a lot of visuals and it's just it's a thick book, but it's easy to read. It's good to go back and remind yourself. Like, every few months I'll just pull it out and just I'll thumb through a few things and it's a good refresher, even though if you've read it a long time ago, keeping it close by to refer back to. And sometimes I'll pressure test my own, as I said, as a solution architect, are we don't do the actual design and development anymore, but when I would pressure test my design. I would create my course and then go back to my book and say like, is it meeting all these things that Julie told me to do? And if it's not, then I'm gonna make changes. So
So I like this question Jillian asked, with the speed things are changing in the industry, are books the best resources? I would say, yeah, there's still the fundamentals are there.
yeah. Hmm.
It's the tools are going to change, the solutions are going to change based on what technology can do. But if you don't have that foundation of really being good at analysis, um, you're going to miss opportunities. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that too. There's a lot to say about how things are changing, but there's also a lot to say about the what psychologically is foundational, and how people
Right.
learn. Hmm.
Well, and that strategic consulting, I mean, AI can do that to a certain degree, but you know, still, I feel sometimes I get really generic answers when I ask chat for too much information, and not being able to really think through the problem in a really authentic way.
Yeah. And now that we can create these agents, right? These chat agents with Gemini or ChatGPT, I've created a Kathy Moore chat agent or Julie Dirksen and gave it that knowledge base from resources online. And you can use that as well instead of using the book. Just say like, all right, I've got this problem, or this is exactly what you love that prompt. Yeah, yeah, we can share that out. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
and that way you can have your own virtual Kathy Moore.
that's
To-
true.
I'll plug in the requests right in there and say, what do you think about this? And it'll help me guide me through what questions I should be asking, which is great.
Right. But we still have to discern those answers.
Hmm.
Right? We still have to validate what they give.
Right.
And and that, yeah, that frontline enablement book, that's on my wish list. So I hear it's really good. Yeah. This is great. I feel so
Yeah.
energized.
Fun group. Thanks so much for all
Yeah,
the
thank you for
participation.
engaging. Yeah, thank
Mhm.
you.